Imagine packing up your entire life, right? Moving across the country to start this highly competitive dream job and then getting fired 14 days later.
Ouch. Yeah, that's brutal.
Right, but now imagine doing that 3 times in a single month. You're flying out, staying in hotels, you're trying to learn a completely new system on the fly, and the moment you even start to unpack your suitcase, management pulls you aside and says, uh, they have to let you go.
It's completely wild.
It is. And in the modern landscape of elite women's basketball, this isn't some anomaly or like a rare tragic story.
Yeah.
It is an actual structural feature of the league.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, we're talking about highly talented, world-class professional athletes operating in an environment where they just aren't treated like long-term investments. They are treated like, well, temporary inventory.
Exactly, like boxes just passing through a warehouse. And it completely shatters the illusion we have about elite professional sports. Because as fans, we assume that when a franchise acquires a player, especially someone who was like dominant in college, there is this grand developmental master plan in place.
Right. You expect a runway. You expect them to be nurtured.
Exactly. You expect a runaway. But when you actually look at the transaction logs for the bottom third of these rosters, I mean, the churn is just relentless. It defies every traditional principle of building a sustainable, cohesive team.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because our mission for today's deep dive is to really look under the hood of that relentless roster churn. We are going to explore why this dizzying player movement is quietly eroding the emotional connection that you, the fan, have with the sport.
Yeah, which is a massive issue.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And beyond just, diagnosing the problem, we are going to look at the mechanics of the solution. We'll examine how fixing very specific structural limits, things like incredibly tight roster caps and a lack of league expansion, how that could unlock a massive new wave of storytelling and fundamentally elevate league culture.
Because the transaction log for some of these athletes is genuinely jarring to look at. I mean, it reads less like a career trajectory and more like a chaotic shipping manifest.
Completely.
And it all happens in the blink of an eye.
So let's actually walk through what that looks like on the ground. A player gets drafted, or maybe traded. They show up ready to prove themselves. 3 days into training camp, they are waived.
Right, the team decides they just don't have the space.
Exactly. But then a week goes by. That exact same team suddenly has, 2 players go down with ankle sprains. So they call that waived player back and bring them in on a hardship signing.
Which is a very specific type of contract.
Right, and for those who don't pore over collective bargaining agreements in their free time, a hardship signing essentially means a team has dropped below a minimum required number of healthy players, so the league grants them a temporary exception to sign an emergency backup.
It's basically the ultimate gig economy contract in professional sports. You are there strictly to be a warm body in practice and maybe play 3 minutes at the end of a blowout.
Exactly. So this player flies back across the country, suits up, and fills the gap. But 10 days later, the injured starter clears concussion protocol.
Or the ankle heals.
Right, the ankle heals. The hardship exception expires, and the player is released again.
Gone.
Another week goes by, completely different franchise, halfway across the country has a gap, so they get picked up there. 2 weeks later, cut again. I mean, you are asking someone to compete against the absolute best basketball players on the face of the earth.
While they're living out of duffel bag.
Yes, living out of a duffel bag.
But what's fascinating here is the ultimate cost of that instability.
Yeah.
Because there is the obvious psychological and physical toll on the athlete, which is immense, obviously.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But there is a secondary hidden cost that the league pays every single time this happens. Because when roster movement is this erratic, it becomes mathematically impossible for you, the fan, to build any genuine attachment to anyone outside of the established top-tier superstars.
I was trying to think of how to explain this emotional disconnect to someone maybe outside of the sports world. And it's like, imagine you are watching this incredibly gripping, critically acclaimed television drama.
Okay.
The lead actor is phenomenal, right? They are on the poster, they get all the screen time, but every single time you tune in for a new episode, the entire supporting cast has been completely swapped out.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, the best friend is played by a different actor, the rival is someone new, the comedic relief is just gone. You simply cannot get invested in the show's universe because you don't know who anyone is from week to week.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It completely breaks the immersion. Because professional sports, at their absolute foundation, are built on emotional connection. Fans do not just support logos.
Right.
They do not just cheer for the laundry. They support people. When you spend $100 on a jersey, you are investing your own identity into a player's narrative.
Yeah.
You want to follow their storyline, root for their personal growth, and feel the weight of their setbacks. You want to feel like you were there from the beginning. But emotional investment requires the one resource these fringe players are never given, which is time.
Right. But wait, let me push back on this a little bit, because isn't professional sports fundamentally a brutal meritocracy?
Sure.
If a rookie comes into training camp and isn't ready to play on day one, shouldn't they lose their spot to a seasoned veteran who is? Like, why is it the team's responsibility to patiently wait for someone to figure it out when the whole point is to win right now?
And that is the exact argument you hear from front offices. But it assumes that talent and immediate readiness are the exact same thing.
Oh, interesting.
And they aren't. This isn't about coddling players who lack talent. It is about recognizing a severe structural squeeze. We have to look at the math of the roster.
Okay, let's look at the math.
The current structure creates a pressure cooker, unlike almost any other major professional league. We are talking about incredibly limited roster spots, usually 11 or 12 players per team.
And 12 spots might sound like plenty to a casual observer. I mean, you only play 5 players at a time, right?
Right, but think about the distribution of minutes. In a 40-minute basketball game, your top 6, 7 players are consuming the vast majority of the time on the court.
Yeah.
That leaves maybe 4 or 5 spots on the bench. In a league with 15-man rosters, like the NBA, those last 3 spots are your developmental runway.
Right, the end of the bench.
Exactly. You can draft a raw, athletic 19-year-old and just sit them at the end of the bench for 2 entire years. You have the physical roster space to hide them while they learn how to be a professional. With an 11-player roster, that buffer just does not exist.
So when the bench is that small, every single decision you make as a general manager or a head coach is high stakes immediately. There is zero margin for error.
Zero. And this introduces a highly destructive dynamic for coaching staffs, which is panic management.
Panic management.
Yes. Think about the reality of a head coach. If your mandate from ownership is to make the playoffs this season or you lose your job, you do not have the luxury of playing the long game. Panic management inherently creates short-term basketball thinking.
You're just trying to survive the week.
Exactly. You stop looking at the horizon and you start staring at the ground directly in front of your feet.
It's like asking a chef to bake a 12-hour smoked brisket in a microwave.
Yes.
Because the restaurant is completely packed and people are hungry right now. The brisket isn't the problem. The brisket has all the potential in the world to be amazing. The timeline is the problem.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Small rosters force a massive shift in how players are evaluated. In a healthy, expansive system, a team evaluates a young player by asking the long-term question: can this player become valuable over time? But under panic management, they are forced to ask a completely different, much more stressful question, which is, can this player help me win a game on Tuesday?
Which artificially caps the league's overall talent pool. Because if the answer to can they help on Tuesday is no, they get cut.
Yep.
You are actively discarding athletes who clearly possess professional level skill simply because that skill isn't perfectly polished on day one. And because teams are trapped in this panic management cycle, no one has the luxury of time.
No one.
So the only way to manufacture that time, to give players that runway, is to physically create more space. And that brings us to the conversation around league expansion.
Which is huge, because expansion is usually talked about purely in terms of labor, right? Like more teams mean more jobs.
Yeah, which is true.
It is true, and it's important for the players' union. But it completely misses the tactical benefit of expansion. Expansion creates the physical room necessary for players to find the right environment to flourish.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because fit is everything. I think a lot of casual fans assume that a good basketball player is just a good basketball player. You can drop them onto any court with any 4 teammates and they will be fine.
Right, just plug and play.
Exactly. But at the professional level, basketball is deeply, incredibly specific.
It is highly contextual. A player's success is almost always inextricably linked to the ecosystem around them. Think about the tactical specifics. You might have a hyper-athletic guard who thrives in a lightning-fast, transition-heavy system where they can just run the floor and attack the rim before the defense sets up.
But if you draft that player onto a team that runs a methodical, slow, half-court offense that relies on dumping the ball into the post, that hyper-athletic guard is going to look terrible.
Exactly.
They're going to look like a bus.
Precisely.
Uh-huh.
Or take a power forward who desperately needs offensive spacing to be effective.
Yep.
If you put her on a team with 3 terrible shooters, the defense is just going to collapse into the paint and she won't be able to score.
Right.
Some players need rigid defensive structures to mask their individual weaknesses. Some players just need the psychological confidence of a coaching staff that actually believes in them. And sometimes, quite frankly, a player just needs 20 minutes a night on the court to find their rhythm, rather than getting yanked after one missed rotation.
But when the league is so small, when there are simply not enough teams, there are not enough varied basketball environments for these fringe players to actually find that perfect fit.
Yeah.
It's like having a job market with only 3 companies. If you don't fit their specific corporate culture, you are unemployed. So more teams don't just create more jobs, they create more basketball identities.
And basketball identities is the key phrase here. When you have a wider variety of identities, the entire ecosystem shifts. Compare this ecosystem to the NBA, which has 30 teams. The NBA has completely mastered this.
Oh, for sure.
You frequently see players who looked completely average or even unplayable on one roster get traded to a new city, and suddenly they look like a 6th Man of the Year candidate.
Right, because the player didn't magically learn how to play basketball on the flight over.
No,
The context around them changed to highlight what they already did well and hid what they did poorly.
exactly. The WNBA desperately needs the physical room, the sheer number of roster spots across a wider variety of franchises for these specific contextual transformations to happen.
And when players are finally allowed to find that fit, when they're given the runway to make that transformation, it creates the absolute best part of sports, which is the storytelling.
Yes.
That storytelling is what fuels the very culture a league needs to survive long term.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, while the league currently has absolutely amazing star power, the household names that draw the national television ratings and the massive shoe deals, it severely lacks structural depth.
Which is so important.
It is, and by structural depth, we are talking specifically about personality depth.
Let's dig into personality depth, because a league is more than just its top 5 scorers.
Every great, enduring sports league relies on a cast of archetypes. Yes, you need the generational superstars, but you also desperately need the underdog stories. You need the incredible grinding comeback stories. You need the winding veteran journeys where a player has been on 5 teams and finally wins a championship in year 12.
Oh, people love those.
They do. You need the cult favorites, the energy guys, the hustle players who dive into the 3rd row for a loose ball. These specific personality archetypes become the cultural fabric of the league. They are the glue that keeps fans attached to the sport during the quiet periods or when their team is going through a rebuilding phase and doesn't have a superstar.
Let me play devil's advocate for the business side again, though. If you are the marketing director for a franchise, it is so incredibly easy to just slap the face of your #1 overall draft pick on a billboard on the highway.
Sure.
That's easy sell, right? Come see the MVP play. Superstars are what drive the massive national broadcast rights deals. Do the underdogs actually matter to the bottom line?
They matter immensely to the local bottom line. The superstar gets the casual viewer in a different time zone to turn on their television. But the gritty role player, the undrafted rookie who fights through a screen and hypes up the crowd, that is the player who compels a fan to buy a ticket, pay for parking, and sit in the arena on a random rainy Tuesday night in November.
Because the fan sees themselves in that hustle player.
Exactly. Most fans cannot relate to being a 6'4" basketball savant who was born with once-in-a-generation effortless physical talent.
I certainly can.
Right. But everybody relates to the person fighting for their professional life. Everyone understands grinding for recognition. When you constantly cut that hustle player every 2 weeks to churn the bottom of your roster, you are actively severing the emotional tie your local fan base has with your team.
You are telling the fans not to get attached.
Precisely. You're training them not to care.
So, if expansion gives players more homes and more distinct basketball identities to fit into, we still run into a timing problem. Let's say a team sees potential in a raw prospect, but they simply don't have the minutes to develop them in high-stakes regular season games.
Right.
How do we give these players the time, the repetitions, and the patience to actually become ready for those new homes without forcing them to flee the country? Because right now, the reality is that the vast majority of developmental minutes are happening overseas.
Which is a massive inefficiency.
Right.
Far too many talented players have to leave America entirely, spending their off seasons playing in Turkey or Italy or Australia
Huh.
just to get the live game repetitions they need to improve.
Yeah.
They are forced to go overseas to get the playing time they mathematically cannot get at home.
Which is wild to think about. We are talking about a booming domestic professional sports market, and yet we are exporting our own potential future stars.
Yeah, we are.
The talent pool in the States is deeper than it ever been in the history of the sport, but the infrastructure hasn't scaled to catch them.
And to solve this, the conversation has to shift toward building a true integrated developmental league. But there is a crucial distinction to be made here. This should not be viewed simply as a minor league where you just park bad players.
Right.
It needs to be viewed and funded as a basketball ecosystem extension.
An ecosystem extension. Okay, what does that actually look like in practice? Break down the mechanics of how that serves a franchise.
Well, it creates a cascade of systemic benefits that go way beyond just giving rookies some playing time. First, yes, it is a place where young, raw guards can actually get 35 minutes of live game repetitions against high-level professional competition.
Instead of sitting at the end of a bench clapping for 2 hours.
Exactly. You learn to play point guard by making mistakes in real time, reading defenses, and adjusting. You cannot learn that in a practice drill.
Right. It provides a margin for error that the main roster completely lacks.
Furthermore, it acts as a controlled environment where injured veterans can rehab properly. If a crucial starter tears her ACL, you don't just throw her back into a high-stakes playoff race the moment she is medically cleared.
No, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. You send her to the developmental affiliate for 3 weeks to get her wind back, test the knee in contact situations, and find her rhythm.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It protects the investment the team has already made in their stars. And what about the coaching staff? Does it help them?
Oh, absolutely. It acts as an incredible research and development lab for the coaches. Let's say a head coach wants to implement a radical, highly aggressive switching defense. If they try it in a regular season game and it fails, they lose, and their job is on the line.
Because of that panic management we talked about.
Exactly. But if they have a developmental affiliate running the exact same system, they can test that experimental defense all year long, figure out the spatial geometry, see what the vulnerabilities are, and perfect it without any immediate threat to the flagship franchise's win-loss record.
That's brilliant. And on a purely business level, it allows smaller market cities that might not have the corporate infrastructure to support a massive top-tier franchise to gain access to professional basketball.
Exactly.
It grows the footprint of the sport regionally. It keeps those fringe players connected to the domestic professional basketball network instead of disappearing overseas where the domestic fans completely lose track of them. It keeps their story alive in the minds of the fans right here at home.
It really is the only way to address a fundamental truth about human development that the current roster structure completely ignores.
Which is that development is almost never linear.
It is rarely linear.
Yeah.
Not everybody becomes great immediately. Human beings are complex. Some players need 2 years of emotional maturity before they are ready to handle the pressure of professional media.
Yeah, it's a huge adjustment.
Some are late bloomers who physically need an extra year in a professional weight room to be able to absorb contact and the pain. And some players just need absolute role clarity. Like they need to spend a year in a developmental league where a coach explicitly says, you are not here to be a playmaker. You are here to set brutal screens, play perimeter defense, and shoot corner threes. That is it.
But small roster structures and the panic management they induce completely kill that patience. Because the league is so fiercely competitive, teams feel like they cannot afford to run long-term experiments.
Right.
Which sounds fantastic if you just want to talk about maintaining elite competitiveness on a daily basis. But the terrifying downside is that the league is almost certainly, accidentally, eliminating future all-stars before they have fully developed.
You are demanding that every player be a finished product on day one. And that is a highly inefficient way to manage human capital.
So, what does this all mean for you? We've covered a lot of ground today. If we take all of these pieces, the dizzying transaction logs of players getting cut every 2 weeks, the brutal math of an 11-person roster, the desperate need for expansion to create diverse basketball identities, and the vital importance of the local cult hero.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
The core takeaway for you listening is this. The margin between a player getting cut and forgotten versus that same player becoming a highly valuable, indispensable asset to a championship team is razor thin. Often, it isn't a lack of talent. It is just a matter of finding the right fit and having the actual physical runway to develop.
Exactly.
Roster stability isn't just some abstract labor argument about job security for the athletes. It is about the fans. It is
Yeah.
about giving you a meaningful long-term story to invest in.
Which, this raises an important question. And it is something I want you to really mull over the next time you are watching a game, regardless of what sport it is. If we agree that this emotional connection to the role players, to the grinders, to the underdogs, is the absolute glue of a sports league's local culture, what happens to the next generation of young fans if they only ever learn to idolize the top 1% of superstars?
Oh, wow.
If a young kid watching the game never gets the chance to see the immense value of that grinder who fights tooth and nail just to keep their spot on the end of the bench, does it fundamentally change how we understand the very concept of teamwork itself?
Wow. That is a heavy thought to leave on. Because you're absolutely right. If you only ever focus on the main character, you completely forget how important the supporting cast is to making the whole world function.
Exactly.
Listen, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this gives you a completely new lens through which to view the transactions flashing across the bottom of your screen. Keep questioning the structures behind the sports you love. And remember, the next time you see a talented player treated like temporary inventory, just swapped out like a recast actor on your favorite TV show.
There's a reason for it.
Right, there is a whole mathematical system behind that decision. And maybe, just maybe, it's a system that needs to change to let the sport truly grow. Until next time.